good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to this channel. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. Now, we're going to be looking at the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. But before we go into that, please subscribe to this channel, share, as well as drop a comment on the comment section. So, from all accounts, documented on the creation of Israel, we recognize the fact that Israel has its origin in the Zionism movement established in the late 19th century by Jews in the Russian Empire, who called for the establishment of the territorial Jewish state after enduring persecution, after enduring persecution. In 1896, Jewish Austrian journalist Theodor Herzl published an influential political pamphlet called The Jewish State, and argues that the establishment of a Jewish state was the only way of protecting the Jews from anti-Semitism. Herzl became the leader of Zionism, convening the first Zionist conference or congress in Switzerland in 1897. Ottoman-controlled Palestine, the original home of the Jews, was chosen as the most desirable location for the Jewish state. And Herzl, unsuccessfully petitioned the Ottoman government for a charter. Now, after the failed Russian Revolution of 1905, growing numbers of Eastern European and Russian Jews began to immigrate to Palestine, joining the few thousand Jews who had arrived earlier. Now, the Jewish settlers insisted on the use of Hebrews as their spoken language. With the collapse of the Ottoman Empire during this First World War, Britain took over Palestine. Now, in 1917, Britain, issued the Balfour Declaration, which declared its intent to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Although protested by the Arab states, the Balfour Declaration included in the British mandate over Palestine, which was authorized by the League of Nations in 1922. For Arab opposition to the establishment of any Jewish state in Palestine, British rule continued throughout the 1920s and 1930s. So now what am I talking about? Now, in the beginning of 1929, Arabs and Jews openly fought in Palestine, and Britain attempted to limit Jewish immigration as a means of appeasing the Arabs. As a result of the Holocaust in Europe, many Jews illegally entered Palestine during the World War II. Radical Jewish groups employed terrorism against British forces in Palestine, which they thought had betrayed the Zionist cause. At the end of the World War II, in 1945, the United States took up the Zionist cause. Britain, unable to find a practical solution, referred the problem to the United Nations, which in November 1947 voted to partition Palestine. Now, the Jews were to possess more than half of Palestine, although they made up less than half of Palestine's population. Can you imagine? How can a population of a people that is less than half of the population of the original inhabitants of that place will actually take more than half of the territory of the population of the people, that is the Palestinians living in that place. Now, the Palestinian Arabs, aided by the volunteers from other countries, fought the Zionist forces, but by May 14, 1948, the Jews had secured full control of the UN allocated, share of Palestine, and also some Arab territory. On May 14, 1948, Britain withdrew with the expiration of its mandate, and the state of Israel was proclaimed. The next day, forces from Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq invaded. The Israelis, though less well equipped, managed to fight off the Arabs and then seized key territory. Okay, and then seized key territory such as Galilee, the Palestinian coast, and a strip of territory connecting the coastal region to the western section of Jerusalem. In 1949, UN brokered ceasefire. UN brokered ceasefire left the state of Israel in permanent control of this conquered territory. The departure of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs from Israel during the war left the country with a substantial Jewish majority. During the Third Arab-Israeli conflict, that is the Six-Day War of 1967, Israel again greatly increased its borders, capturing from Jordan, Egypt, and Syria the old city of Jerusalem, the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. In 1979, Israel and Egypt signed an historic peace agreement in which Israel returned the Sinai in exchange for Egyptian recognition and peace. Now, Israel and Palestine Liberation Organization, that's the PLO, signed a major peace accord in 1993, which envisioned the gradual implementation of Palestinian self-government in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The Israeli-Palestinian peace process moved slowly. However, in 2000, major fighting between Israeli and Palestinians actually resumed in Israel, in Israel and the occupied territory. Now, what I'm actually trying to talk about is that, the Israeli actually are laying claim to the Palestinian territory, where they actually insisted that their ancestral, that is actually their ancestral homeland. But the Palestinians have actually occupied that place for a very long time. They have inhabited that place for a very long time. Now, because of the Holocaust, the world actually became, because of the Holocaust in Europe, the Europeans as well as the Western world actually, became sentimental, and then in trying to placate or propitiate the minds of the Jewish, decided to actually, settle them in Palestine. Okay, now some of those Israelis actually left, to settle in that place, and after the Second World War, a lot of them started, going back to that place. Okay, now, don't forget that there are series of military conflicts between Israeli and the Arab forces. Okay, a lot of them actually have been there for a very long time. We have the 1948 to 1949, we have the 1956, we have the 1967, we have the 1973, we have the 1982, we have the 2006, and then we also have the 2023. Of course, there have been series of crises or conflict between the Arab and Israeli crisis. Arab and, of course, between the Palestinian and Israelis. But what is important is that the world is actually gradually drifting to a third world war, because Palestinians actually have, some degree of supporters, particularly, around the Middle East, China, Russia, North Korea, and all of that. Now, the Israel, on the other hand, also has, the Western world actually supporting them. So you find out that this war, if not properly handled, can actually trigger, a third world war. Okay, so the United Nations should rise to the occasion right now to actually proffer a lasting peace, lasting solution to this crisis. Thank you very much.